Welcome to this edition of Africa 360, the current affairs show that unpacks African news, where we go beyond the headlines to bring you what you won't see anywhere else. If it's about Africa, we'll certainly bring it to you. I'm Chris Maruleng, and this is Africa 360. In this edition, he was sold into slavery at the age of 9, but escaped into the United States. And now he's one of the foremost activists fighting the scourge of modern-day slavery. This week on Africa 360, we speak to renowned South Sudanese human rights advocate Simon Deng. All this and more coming up right here on Africa 360. The story of South Sudanese refugee and renowned human rights activist Simon Deng is an inspiring one. Deng was kidnapped as a 9-year-old in South Sudan by North Sudanese troops during the civil war in that country, and he was then given to a family in the north as a gift. He endured 3 years of suffering at the hands of his slave masters. It was at that time that he entered into a stage of reflection, and it was his inner strength that drove him to never give up hope, although he faced insurmountable odds. He's now based in the United States, where he's involved in activism to eradicate modern-day slavery in Sudan and in other parts of Africa. Today, here on Africa 360, we speak to this remarkable man about his harrowing experience as a child slave, and more importantly, what he thinks should be done to eradicate the plague of child slavery in Africa.
At the age of 9, I was taken to the slavery in which I spent 3.5 years of my life as a slave. These are the things most of us in Sudan, we don't talk about it because we come from a culture in which sometimes people don't talk about bad things. And indeed, when I got out from the slavery, I decided I'm not going to talk about it at all. The only 6 people knows it. My mom, my dad, my brother, and 3 gentlemen who helped make it possible for me to get out from the slavery. Until I came to this country, in which I read in the newspaper you can go to Sudan and buy a slave for $10. That brought everything back in me, in which I have to debate myself, and I didn't sleep for 3 days. For the simple reasons, how can I now go to bed and live in denial at the time that people are still being slaves?
Well, joining me now is none other than Simon Deng, that is the South Sudanese human rights activist who was formerly or happened to be a slave. So thank you so much for joining us on Africa 360.
Thank you for having me.
There's so much ground to cover in this amazing story that has formed part of your journey of your life. But let's start at the very beginning about this harrowing experience that you went through when you were 9 years old and taken into slavery. What basically happened?
It was in the city of Malacan, which is now known as the capitals of the Upper Niles, where I was kidnapped by an Arab gentleman by the name Abdullah. He took me all the way to Kosti, where his village is. And then in Kosti, he took me to his village, a suburb of Kosti, a place called Fashishoya. Everybody in Arab knows that. But
before we continue on this experience that you're relating to us, one of the things that a lot of people would be asking is, why on earth would what seemingly was a total stranger abduct a child and give him the right to move you from Malakal to the Nile, I assume, on this trip up north? What gave him the authority and the power to do this over you?
You know, it is a very good question, and to translate in the mind and practice of the northerners that happened to be in the southern Sudan at that time, they always don't see and look at that African child as a human being. They always look at the African child or an African person always as somebody who is lower than them, as somebody that well known in the entire Sudan, that a black person there by nature is an abid, which is slaves. That itself, knowing that that person is a slave, then you have every right, since you are not a slave, since you are the one enslaving them, then you have a right to do whatever you want to do. For instance,
let's define this a little bit clearer, particularly for the audience so they can understand. When you talk of slavery, what exactly are you referring to? What is the practice, particularly in terms of your experience?
You know, slavery then, because I didn't know that I'm going to be a slave. I was not born a slave. I was born in a lovely family. I have a wonderful mother and father, I have brothers and sisters, until one day that I end up being given away as a gift, in which that I was introduced to do all the domestic works which I never did in my life. I was forced to do the work that which was not being done by the human being. For instance, in that village, a village of Shishoye, at that time, they don't have running water in their houses. People get the water from the river Niles, and then it is the donkeys are the one always doing the work, carrying the water from the Nile into the houses. For that family, since they have a slave in that house, and that slave happened to be a child, 9 years old, is the one have to do the work. I'm the first to get up in the morning and the last person to go to sleep. Even I don't have a place where I will spend a night like any human being, live out that like any child. My place can be any place where I have to make sure that this place is clean, because this is where I will spend the night. I have to rely on leftover. People have to eat. If there is anything left over, that is what I have to eat. I have to be victimized, being beaten constantly, even that I did nothing wrong. Somebody within the family may decide to beat me up and come up with the justification by saying, I call you, but you didn't say yes so loudly. And that all will it take for me to punish. For instance, even the kids in my age, they will call, you know, for fun, Dugal Abid in Arabic, which is beat the slave. And those kids will gang up to punish me, and which I cannot defend myself. All I have to do to cry for mercy.
Beaten up and ganged up upon by the people who held him captive while he was 9 years old. Today we bring you the harrowing tale of Simon Deng, who was held in captivity as a slave in Sudan. Do stay with us after the break as we continue our conversation only on Africa 360.
Of course, I did come close to convert and take the Arab name, but the difficult one is to give away my identity.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa 360, and today we are in conversation with Simon Deng. He's from South Sudan, and he was once abducted and sold into slavery as a 9-year-old during the civil war in Sudan, which spanned almost 2 decades. Today we're in conversation, and we're talking about this harrowing experience and the question about slavery, particularly in modern day times. Before we went to break, you're relating what it basically meant to be a slave in the North at that time. But more importantly, you were relating to us the story of how the relations between communities in Sudan, currently Sudan and South Sudan, almost gave the power to others to impose this life of slavery. Is that the case, sir?
You know, if you look at the historicals of Sudan's history, in which that history of Sudan was not even really, was not defined and read and written properly the way it should be, because the Southern Sudanese that happened to be in the indigenous peoples of the lands, they were not included in the Sudanese history, simply because from day one, when the Arabs immigrate to Sudan, the African didn't see them as friends or friendly. They never seen them as part of who they are. They always look at them as a slave masters.
Let me ask you this question. Being enslaved, and I know at that stage, this was between the ages of 9 and about 12 years old, because you were in slavery for 3.5 years. Could you give us a sense of what it is that they have to do to you to make you remain a slave? Surely it must have occurred to you even at that young age, the idea of running away. Why didn't you run away?
It is a very good question, and always everybody said us that, at that times, as a child of 9 years old, being forced to do the works that animals have to do. Of course, the easy thing, what you should have done is to run away. But let's face it, I was not a child who happened to be educated, that number one. Number two, when I was being beaten and tortured, they usually tell me that if I made things of trying to run away, in Sudan at that time there is in every country there is a picture of human being in a currency. In Sudan there is a picture of human being with no legs. So they will beat me and then they will bring that, not the money, and then I will be forced to look at it, and then forced to look at it very well. If you make things of trying to run away, you will not have any place to go. We will capture you and we will cut your legs and you will look exactly like that. As a child, being beaten and now being threatened, of course, I did believe that their threat was real. And that itself made me not to think, even though that there was an offer for me that if I want to be treated like a human being, there are things that I have to do. Number one, I have to convert to Islam. Number two, I will take the Arab name. And thirdly, I will become their son. Of course, I did come close to convert and take the Arab name, but the difficult one is to give away my identity. I have a lovely mother and a father. How can I give entire identity at the time that I'm not being treated as a human being? And of course, since I know only one word is yes and yes to everything, in which I cannot tell them no, all I have to say, yes, I'm going to do that, but I will tell you, I will tell you, I will tell you. But they was leaving that he will do it tomorrow, or he will do it next tomorrow.
So here you are, you are captive, you are a slave, you are threatened, you are abused both emotionally, psychologically, even spiritually to a great extent. And what seems to occur is that your identity and self-worth is stripped away. But there was a silver lining in the story, because somehow you managed to find escape. What was that process? How did you get there?
What happened was that in that village, a village of Shishoya, in which that I didn't have a friend to talk to, I didn't find any person to, even the kids in my age, that these are the kids which I supposed to interact with now. They always come and beat me up for fun, dugalabit and so on and so on. I have to rely on hope and patience. Hope, assuming that tomorrow somebody will come and rescue me. Patience, that I have to wait. That hope will come. That hope will come. And indeed, it did come when that family have to move from the village of Shishoya, the suburb, into the city of Kosti, because their son have to go to the junior high school in Kosti. It was in Kosti where I ran into the 3 Shuluk gentlemen carrying the Shuluk tribal mark in their forehead.
Very similar to
like
the ones
what
that
I
you
have
bear
today.
right now.
I didn't have those tribal marks that you're seeing today at that times. When I saw them, I could not believe my eyes. What I did is go to them to tell them everything, that to convince them. Since I don't have Shuluk tribal marks, I have all is the word of mouth, telling them my mom name, my dad name, anything I can come up with, even the name of the village that I came from. Unfortunately, one of them said to me that we will go and talk to another person that happened to come from the village you mentioned to us. I felt really terrible and bad. I thought that they didn't believe everything I said. I said that to myself, probably I didn't convince them enough, and now they're leaving me. And I cried. And then one of them put his arm on me, telling me that, don't cry. We believe everything you said. But unfortunately, you come from further southern Shuluk. The Tonga is further southern, and they come from farther all the way to a northern Shuluk, close to Kodok, which is further north. Indeed, they went and then find that individuals, and they came the following days, and then I could not believe to see somebody that I saw, somebody that I know in my village. When I saw him, to me, it was the sun come out from nowhere. I was so happy. Unfortunately, that individual brought down in tears, because in my absence during my disappearance, my father did come up with 10 cows when he was looking for me, offering that for anyone who will come up and tell him about his son, that person will be given a reward. 10 cows in Africa, as we know, is a very valued things. 2.5 years come and pass by. Nobody came to claim 10 cows. And then my parents went to put together funerals of their lost kids without knowing what happened to him. And that's why that individual was crying. He was the one who did promise me that I should not go and tell my slave master that I met somebody I knew, because he was afraid if I do so, they will take me somewhere where I will not be found. And indeed, he was probably right.
So it's a fascinating story of hope and redemption and trust, and indeed release and freedom that you're relating to us. But eventually, and I apologize if I seem to be speeding you up, but because of limitations of time and the ground that we need to cover, an arrangement was made, and at some stage, it was arranged for your release.
There was no arrangement.
There was no arrangement?
There was no arrangement.
What did you do?
He was the one who promised me that I have to keep it the way it is, in which that he told me in my meeting that we will be meeting every one other day in the same location, very briefly, while he is working in a process of, making himself ready to go back to Southern Sudan, because when you have to leave, you have to going back to Southern Sudan, which is far away from where we are. It's not a thing that you just leave and come back tomorrow. So he was the one preparing, getting tickets, buying these things, even buying me some clothes, because I didn't have proper clothes. And when that time came for us to leave, he told me, next tomorrow, I will come and find you here, and then we're gone. And that's exactly happened. In other words, he kidnapped me from my slave master without my slave master know what happened. And it is indeed did come as true when 9 years later, after I went back to my slave master, because I don't want to lose track with them, because I want this compensation like what we're talking, that one day somebody may ask them, do you know this boy? Now I'm a man. And then if they say yes, then that person will come again. In which way? How do you know him?
Indeed, how do you know him? A harrowing story of how a man, indeed a boy at the time, was enslaved, and his account of his ultimate escape from that. Join us after the break as we continue our conversation with Simon Deng, as he tells us how this story evolved into one in which he overcame the atrocities of modern-day slavery in Africa, only on Africa 360.
Look me in the eyes, and you see the tears. Of somebody who is asking freedom. My people need freedom.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa 360, your portal to what's making headlines right across the African continent. Our guest today is Simon Deng. He's a former South Sudanese child slave who is now a human rights activist. So before we went to break, you were relating your harrowing ordeal, and in actual fact, we were at the point of your release. You arrived back home, and you have traveled all of this way from the north back to South Sudan, close to your home province of Tonga. Just give us a sense of how that must have been for you and indeed your family at finally seeing this person who, for all intents and purposes, they believed had either died or had been abducted into slavery, never to be seen again.
You know, to me, I was born again from horror of terror. And now I'm back in the hands of people who nurture me, people who love me, people who put their arm on my shoulder, even that I didn't have anything to eat, and give me love. It is unbelievable. And that is why when I was back as a free person in Southern Sudan, the first thing I did is to go back to the village that I was born, village that was already being destructions, because at that time there is peace agreement being just signed between the North and the South, which known as Addis Ababa agreements. The first thing I did is to put those Shilluk tribal marks in their forehead.
Why?
I have. Yes, you have to see it that way. In my mind and my belief at that time, if it was not those tribal marks, I wouldn't be here with you today.
Yeah.
I would have, vanished in slavery, in which I would have took the offer, where I would have taken the name Muhammad Ahmad somewhere and be somewhere in the northern Sudan today, not in southern Sudan. But it was those tribal marks which brought my freedom. And not even that. The reason behind why I have to put those tribal marks, because in my back of my head, there is this fear of somebody may come and snatch me against. So to me, that if somebody will come and take me against, now he's going to be taking a Shilluk boy, not a boy which is not known, not a boy who have no marks to be shown by, to be seen by anyone that he is belong to either a Nubians or the Four or the whatever that a tribe in Sudan. He will be holding a Shilluk boy. That was the reasons behind why I went and put those tribal marks.
Because of the short space of time that we have, I must bring you back to this issue of slavery in Africa. Indeed, you went through this harrowing ordeal, but it does appear that what you're saying to us is that the question of oppression, the question of slavery, human trafficking, indeed, in Africa is an ongoing issue, even during this period. Is it fair to say that?
It is very sad, when we're talking about the topics which is every country have denounced it so long ago. And then, unfortunately, when we have two countries in Africa, a country of Sudan and a country of Mauritania, even though Mauritania denounced slavery 3 times. 3 times. One was recently less than 7 years ago. That's what the last denouncement of the slavery, which means that if you denounce it once and denounce it twice, and again, which means that these things, problems still exist. Sudan never done that. And then take the one of Sudan, when the prime minister admitted that yes, slavery still exists, even that he put it in a different form by trying to implicating the African, that African take the Arab kids and the Arab will go and take the, he was lying, is one way, the Arab. And then secondly, the President Bashir himself, when he put together an institutions to eradicate abductees, because that's the word of Bashir, these are people being abducted. What is the difference you abduct a child and enslave a child? Because to him, using the word slavery, that is the word of Westerns and so on, called the CIA and so on. This is his language.
But what is it now that we can do during this period to really add impetus around these efforts to really abolish and end slavery, not just in those 2 countries that you happen to mention, but right through Africa where we still see some of these activities occurring?
Based on what Sadiq al-Mahdi, which is the prime minister, said that, slavery is there because of the war. Slavery is there because of the war. Then if the war may still continue, then slavery may come back again. Although that we don't have the slavery now at the moment we're speaking, but we still have people which is still in bondage, which is another issue that we have to go and find them wherever they are, although there are some NGOs working on these things. But these are the things now, if there is no peace, they will not come out. But if there's going to be a normal peace, because as I know, Northern Sudanese citizens and Southern Sudanese citizens, they want to live in peace and harmony.
Peace and harmony indeed. Simon Deng, sir, we salute you and we thank you for all your efforts in trying to raise the scourge of modern day slavery to the attention of the world and indeed to Africa. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you for having me here today.
AFRICA360.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to the end of yet another edition of your program, AFRICA360. If you'd like to leave a comment or join the debate on Africa, you can indeed find us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter or drop us an email on africa360@enca.com. And remember, you're more than welcome to give us suggestions on topics you'd like us to cover in upcoming editions of your program, AFRICA360. Remember, in the words of Simon Deng, freedom is not free, and it is up to us to end the scourge of slavery on our continent. So until next time, we look forward to bringing you Africa like you've never seen it before. Do take care.